Welcome everyone who's joining us today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from.
I wrote a sticky note and put it on my computer that says, "Be the sponge."
There are some school-specific sponsorships which make you feel like more inclined towards them.
While you're an MBA, you have unprecedented access to a lot of people, be it alums, recruiters, or your professors, your career services. Make the most out of your time, talk to people, get a clear understanding of what you want to go into.
Hello, everyone. As you just heard, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are. Today, we're going to talk about some key reading comprehension tips that I think are going to be game-changing for your score. You'll learn how to prep, and you'll learn how to handle these passages and really nail this thing. Before we go to that, I just want to mention that as you see below, GMAT Club has an MBA Spotlight going on in June. You can meet with people from top 25 business schools, admissions officers, and admissions experts to learn everything you need to know before you apply for round one. Okay, so now let's get to this reading comprehension. The key thing here is we got some game-changing reading comprehension tips for you. And there's a lot of cool things we can do here. We're going to see that it's not just about learning rules and different techniques for reading comprehension, but there's also a whole holistic aspect to the game that we need to understand. Okay. So the first thing I want to talk about, and this may seem obvious to you, but it's not always obvious to people, and that is a GMAT reading comprehension is truly about comprehension, okay? So what do I mean by this? Well, there's a lot of impressions we can get about GMAT reading comprehension because you can learn about, okay, we can learn about keywords, we can learn about different techniques for going through the passage, parts of the passage we should read, things like that, okay? But the first thing we want to know is that it's really about comprehension, right? We have to understand what we're reading to nail GMAT reading comprehension, okay? So that's the first thing we want to bring up. You're going to have to understand these passages. It's not about just learning keywords. It's not just about learning about question types or how to relate to question types of the passage. At some point, in some way, you're going to have to understand when you're reading. Okay. So now what it's not about, as I was saying, is, let's say, focusing only on keywords or components of the passages, right? Okay. It's not about that. We're definitely going to have to comprehend, right? Secondly, we're not going to use gimmicky methods to eliminate choices. So many people get the impression that GMAT reading comprehension is about using gimmicky methods to eliminate choices. Oh, I'm going to just eliminate all the extreme choices and see what's there. I'm going to eliminate choices that don't match the wording in the passage and see what's there, what's left. This is not the way we're going to get reading comprehension done, okay? And we're not, as I said, we're not just going to match words to choose the answers here. This is a key mistake that people make. You see something in the choice that matches the passage. You're like, that's got to be it. This doesn't look like the passage, but this does. There's one of the questions I like the best has to do with the clock. And the passage talks about all these different types of clocks. And the correct answer just says a non-X clock, right? So it doesn't mention any of the types. It doesn't mention any of the types of clocks. It says that it's talking about a clock that's not one of the other types of clocks, right? So people miss that question like crazy. Why? Because they're looking for something that looks like the passage. In this thing, it doesn't talk about a non-clock. That can't be part of it. So we're not just seeking to match words to choose answers. I mean, these are just some basic things you want to see. Okay, we're not just going to focus on keywords and components of passages. We're not going to use gimmicky methods to eliminate choices. We're not just going to match words to select answers. And we're going to go through a few examples. I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. Okay, so now here's the overall mindset we need for this. And if you have this mindset, it's going to help a lot because it's going to take care of some of the stuff we've already been talking about. You're not going to do it if you have this mindset, and you are going to do what you need to do if you have this mindset. And the mindset is GMAT reading comprehension is a component of an admissions test for graduate school. So what does that mean, right? I mean, if you're going to business school, would you expect them to test you to see whether you can match words? No, right? Would you expect them to test to see if you can, use some gimmicky methods for limiting answer choices? No, right? So those methods are going to get you to some kind of low score. It'll get you some questions correct, absolutely, but it's not going to get you into the graduate school of your choice, because the graduate school of your choice isn't looking for that. What is really going on here is that the test is fairly sophisticated, okay? And so we have to see it that way. It's a fairly sophisticated test that's really asking us to think. If you see it that way, you're going to do the right things. You're setting up your mindset to treat the questions with respect, right? Okay. So this question is asking me X, Y, Z. You're not going to go into it thinking, well, I'm just going to find a part of the passage, or I'll remember what's going on in my head, or I'll eliminate the choices that don't sound right. You're going to treat it with respect and say, I really have to understand this passage. I know I'm going over this a lot, but the reason is, so often when I see people having trouble with reading comprehension, it's because they're not doing this. I've seen students that I'm teaching, we go through a passage and I see them mark all the keywords or mark different sentences, and they're not really reading the passage. They're not treating the questions with respect. They're somehow thinking some formulaic thing is going to get them to the answers, and it just doesn't, okay? Have to treat the questions with respect. So now, what is reading comprehension test? Okay, what does it test? It tests three things. It tests how well we comprehend what we read. We've already talked about that, right? So we have to understand something. I know a lot of people are non-native English speakers that take the test. Sure, it's going to be a little harder for you to comprehend every single aspect, but you can still get the general idea of the passage. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. What is this passage saying? And every passage has a simple story to it. So if we can figure out what that simple story is, then in a large sense, to a large extent, we've figured out what the reading comprehension passage means. The next Read RC tip here is, this thing is testing us on how well we notice details of what we read. Okay, this is huge. And this goes all the way through GMAT verbal, whether we're talking about reading comprehension, critical reasoning. We have to notice details. And of course, this matters for business school, because whether you notice details of a business plan, details of a model, details of something else, it's going to matter for your success in analyzing this stuff or answering questions or understanding the discussion. Noticing details is huge. And it's part of the reason I know I've scored pretty well in the GMAT. And it's part of the reason I've been in businesses where it was make or break whether you notice details. And I learned to notice details. And then I came to the GMAT, and a lot of this stuff was natural. Learning to notice details is going to be huge for both this test and your work. And the third thing it tests is how well we pick up on implications of what we read. Okay. And this isn't just understanding what we read, but what does it mean, right? What does these implications mean? Like, we're reading this, what does it imply? Like, if X is true, what can we take from that? So it's definitely going to test that too. And that's where we want to be super careful in the questions, because they're going to mislead us. They're going to give us trap choices that don't fit those implications, that don't follow from what we read, but feel right, okay? So a lot of this is going to be about noticing what's implied and what feels right, and noticing the difference. Okay, so with this in mind, there are 4 things we need to do for reading comprehension success. One is understand the understand the passages, rather. We have to understand the passage. Okay, we've covered that. The second thing is we have to understand the questions. So what's going to help, obviously, is preparing so that we know the different types of questions, what they ask, and how they apply. Okay, and what we really need to see, and what type of answer they're looking for. Okay, and then within an individual question, well, what is it asking? What exactly does it ask us? This is going to get us a long way, because if you understand the passage and understand the question, you're fairly well along to getting correct answers. And that's our whole game in GMAT Reading Comprehension, is to get as many correct answers as possible, right? The next thing is testing our skill, that we need to do, is finding the passages, the right information for answering the questions. And this is another big RC skill. You're going to see as we go through some examples that finding the information is huge, okay? So yeah, you understand the question, you understand the passage, but the question is going to be about a lot of time a little part of the passage, or we're going to have to find details of the passage to answer the question. So huge skill, and you're going to need to develop this, is skill in finding the information in the passages. So if you're having trouble with RC, questions are taking you too long, think about it. Am I really developing skill in finding the right information? Or have I maybe that's what's going on. Like, I'm not finding the right information. I'm taking too long to do this. Maybe that's what's taking you too long. So we're going to cover a little bit about how to do that. And then finally, this is huge. This is the final thing. You've understood the passage, you've understood the question, you found the right information. Now we have to tell trap choices from correct answers. And this might be the most tricky part of it as of all, because the trap choices definitely feel correct. So basically, when we're doing GMAT RC questions, a lot of what we're doing is choosing between what feels correct and what actually is correct, right? And you'll see this in the questions we go through. We're going to be talking about, well, is this really correct? What's the difference here? This sure feels right, and you'll see how some of the traps are set up to really feel right. They're playing into our cognitive biases, and they're really trying to drag us. I don't know. Well, maybe they're not trying to drag us into choosing them. Suppose the GMAT says that they don't really try to trick us, but what they do is they write a choice so that if you don't understand the question, you don't understand the passage, you haven't found the right information, then it will feel right. So you won't be able to tell the difference. You can't just look at the choices and go, the one that feels right is right, because a lot of them feel right. So we need specifics to determine which choice is correct. Okay. So any questions so far? Just checking my let's see what's going on. How to work upon your understanding skills. Okay, good question. How to get better at understanding the passages. We're going to talk about this more, but a lot of it is going to come down to taking your time. Okay, whether all these things, it's going to come down to taking your time. So when you're reading these passages, take your time at first. Okay, because we all know that we have to answer GMAT questions in a couple minutes each, right? So then you think, well, okay, I'm doing this passage. It's taking me too much time to read. I should get through a passage in 3-4 minutes, but it's taking me 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and I still don't understand it. Well, I got news for you. If you don't understand the passage in 5 minutes, you're not going to do better by reading it in 3. Take your time and learn to understand it. And, some people get distracted halfway through a sentence. Okay, fine. Well, then your goal is to maybe take 10 minutes to read through the passage. And anytime you get distracted, learn to catch yourself and keep going through the sentence. Other people have trouble with certain vocabulary words. You have to learn to figure out what the meaning is from the context. Okay, if that's going to take you 10 minutes in a passage, spend the 10 minutes, right? Learn to get the job done. Learn to learn by doing on time is a huge, huge thing for all of the GMAT, And for all the GMAT is learning by doing on time, whether we're talking about quant, reading comprehension, critical reasoning, any of this stuff, you got to learn by doing. And you're going to do it as well as you are on time first, and then work on doing it time. Work the time down. Okay, so that's your best thing. You can also do some outside reading. If you're using a Target Test Prep course, in the Intro to Reading Comprehension chapter, we have a list of publications you can read articles from. Reading articles can definitely help. Some people have trouble with certain types of passages. People have trouble, let's say, with science passages, or they have trouble with history passages, or whatever it is. Well, if you have trouble with certain type of passage, then go find a resource that has that kind of writing. Like, for instance, for science, I really like Science Daily. So I would personally, if I was having trouble with the science passages, I would just read Science Daily. It's so easy to read. It's so fun. There's so many cool articles in that thing. So you could read that and learn how to read science passages, become accustomed to the different terms, biology or stars or, I don't know, acceleration or something, whatever's messing you up. If it's history, same type of thing. Does that answer your question? Is taking time, and doing, definitely. Taking your time and doing that consistent practice absolutely is, you'll get through and you will learn to do RC. And you're going to go through and analyze your errors and things like that and learn to get these questions correct. I had trouble with RC in the beginning too. And we're going to talk about some other stuff. But anyway, let's continue. Okay, here's a passage I want to go through. And I want you to think about these things we were just talking about. Understanding the passage, understanding the question, okay, finding the information you need in the passage, and telling the difference between trap choices and correct answers. I'll give you about, 5 minutes to do this one. Let's spend 5 minutes on this approximately, and then we'll go through it. Okay, if you want to start putting your answers in the chat, let's see what you think. What do you think the answer to this one is? Any opinions? It's a little tricky. Okay, I see a couple different opinions so far. Anybody else have any anything else we think might be right? Yeah. Okay, let's go through this and see what's going on and talk about the four things we just talked about, four parts of getting these questions right. The first thing is understanding the passage. And we see that, notice, we see it starts off with despite. Despite is a key word. It's a contrast word. It's probably going to be important. But the key thing here also is, as I was saying, don't be too focused on a word like despite, or further along we see, I see attributed Churchill's staunch position. You know, all these words, we can get so caught up in them and say like, well, this is what I need to do, is notice these keywords like despite or attributed is, you know, substantial opposition, attributed, no small, staunch position, you know, all these things, these keywords. Okay. No, we really have to understand the position, the passage. So what we're going to do is use these words like despite, and that to understand what's going on, but we're not going to overemphasize them. So the point here is, despite the custom of appeasement that was cultivated by Neville Chamberlain and substantial opposition to the government to undertaking a war against Germany, Winston Churchill fervently denounced appeasement. So this sounds like a really important part, right? So despite this thing, he fervently denounced appeasement. Some historians have attributed Churchill's staunch position in no small part to his temperament. Okay, now what's going on? We see what's going on. He had this position, and people have attributed to his temperament. So now we talked about understanding the passage, but now look what's going on here. For example, in Aspects of Aristocracy, David Carradine describes Churchill as intransigent, embittered, apocalyptic. Similarly, blah, blah, blah. Look at this. This is all added detail, just backing up that point, okay? This is all added detail. It's just examples. So now this part, yes, we talk about understanding the passage, but we don't necessarily have to pick up on all these details and make sure we know all those when we're reading the passage. So I don't want to, confuse you into thinking you have to notice every detail. Me personally, I would see this and go, look, David Carradine, we got this other guy, 5 Days in London, John Lukács. I'm not going to try to remember all this. If they ask me which author referred to Churchill's belligerent manner, I'm going to go back and look that up in the passage. I'll remember these authors were mentioned here. Not going to go crazy though, remembering all those details. Okay, then it says such portrayals are consistent with at least some assessments of Churchill's character, and the idea that his idiosyncrasies played a role in his decision making is only reasonable. Okay, so it's only reasonable. Lost my pen. However, to put too great of an emphasis on Churchill's persona diminishes his political shrewdness. So now we see, however, right? However, to put too great emphasis on Churchill's persona diminishes his political shrewdness. Once again, we need to understand this passage, but we do need the keywords like however, so like despite. So we're seeing a key part, but we're not going to emphasize this. We're not going to go crazy going, okay, when I need to answer these questions, I have to find these keywords. This tells me what's going on. You're going to have to understand what the sentence means. So what happened? To put too great an emphasis on his persona diminishes his political shrewdness, means that it's kind of ignoring his shrewdness, right? So now, once again, we have, unlike Chamberlain and many other government officials, Churchill did not underestimate the strength of Hitler's leadership. In fact, he recognized Hitler's intention to start a war even before Hitler assumed a post of chancellor. Grasping Hitler's capabilities, Churchill understood the importance of preparing the British public for the prospect of war. Okay, here's what's going on here. This is all, once again, a bunch of examples, okay? This is just supporting information, right? All this stuff. Now, so what do we do when we read this? We need to understand these key parts. The key parts about what some people think is his temperament, and then to overemphasize his persona diminishes his political shrewdness. And then all this other stuff that we're seeing going on here is just detail that that's not understanding the passage. We go through those details, we see what they're saying. Okay, the better you are at reading, faster you can read, maybe the more of these details you're going to pick up. But what we really want to understand is what this passage said. And what are the two things it said? Basically, it said that some historians have attributed Churchill's strong position in no part to his temperament. And then the second main thing is it said to put too great an emphasis on his temperament is to diminish his political shrewdness, right? That is the simple story of this passage. That's what we need to understand. So now we've done our first step, which is understanding the passage. Now we need to understand this question, right? So the passage as a whole, now if you've seen a lot of these questions, you'll know that they usually say as a whole, can be best described as doing which of the following. So by practicing, we're going to get used to understanding these questions. And we know when it says as a whole, that we have to find a choice that describes the whole passage, not a part of the passage, right? Okay, so now we understand the question. Going to the answers, we're going to have to find the information in the passage to see whether these are correct. So let's take a look at this. Refuting a widely held view of Churchill's motivations for denouncing appeasement of Germany. Notice I'm reading the entire choice. This is going to be so key. Okay, and I'm going to talk about this more in a minute, but we really need to read the entire choice. This is another little thing that people do that wrecks them in RC is they don't read the entire choice. Like we see, it says widely held view. It's so tempting to just say, oh, maybe this is right. And I don't think anyone chose this one, but it said widely held view. It feels right. The passage was about that. And it does seem to go against a widely held view, sort of toward this second part, right? In the second part here, oh, wait, there's this other view. It's not, that would be overemphasizing, wouldn't be a good idea, but it doesn't refute it. So look what they did here. Talk about seeing the difference between trap choices and correct answers. A trap choice will feel right. This feels right, right? We started off with a widely held view, and then we kind of went against it. But did we refute it? No. So this is how the trap choices in RC are going to work. And this is the kind of thing we have to be able to tell the difference between what feels right and what is right. Refuting is not right, because refuting means basically proving it incorrect. We certainly don't prove the view incorrect. Remember talking about going back to the passage, look for the information. Let's see, did it prove it incorrect? No, it said, as a matter of fact, that it's reasonable right here, right? So we can go back to the passage and find that. Choice A is out. Some people pick B and C. So let's go to another choice. So if you picked A, right, now you see the difference. Now you see how important it is to notice the difference between trap choices and correct answers. Let's go to E. Resolving a dispute about the influence of Churchill's temperament on decision-making regarding war with Germany. Okay. Is there a dispute? See what they're doing again here? We do have some disagreement or different opinions, right, about Churchill's temperament on his decision-making regarding war with Germany. We do have some difference of opinion, or some nuances. But is there a dispute? I don't see a dispute. It says that the idea that Churchill's idiosyncrasies played a role in his decision-making is reasonable, right? That's what it says. So that's not a dispute. It's saying it's reasonable, but in the top of the second paragraph. So it's not really resolving a dispute. And also, look at the verb here. Does it really resolve anything? No, right? So once again, does this feel right? Absolutely. We see two different sides of the story, but we've gone too far with dispute, and we're not resolving anything. So this choice is out. So once again, going back to the passage, seeing this part about reasonable, right? And seeing whether it really was a dispute is gonna take us, enable us to eliminate that trap choice. And what we do when we're eliminating trap choice is looking for failure points, right? So a dispute is a failure point because there's no real dispute in this. There's just two nuances or two aspects of an opinion, and nothing gets resolved, so that kills it too. Okay, let's look at D. Explaining the difficulties Churchill faced in convincing Chamberlain of the inevitability of war. If you didn't know which choice is correct here and you were going through the answers, we could at least get rid of this one, right? This is an easy out choice. Does it ever explain the difficulties Churchill faced in convincing Chamberlain? Look through that passage. I see Chamberlain up in the top. Let's do a little word scan. And I see unlike Chamberlain in the second part, but there's nothing about explaining difficulties. So that's one of our easy out choices. And it certainly helps to eliminate an easy out choice, right? Because then we're left with less to deal with. So we definitely want to get rid of a choice like that. That's going to be part of our RC arsenal, is getting rid of easy out choices. In fact, one thing that works super well is eliminating from worst to best. A lot of time you look at a question like this, okay, resolving a dispute, I don't know, it kind of sounds okay. Discussing the extent to which Churchill's temperament underlays political behavior, that seems possible. Outlining a difference of opinion, we certainly have two opinions. Refuting a widely held view, they all start looking the same, right? So what you can do is work from worst to best. And in this case, the worst is most certainly this point about, it's most certainly just explaining the difficulties. The difficulties are never explained. Okay, let's look at one more now. Just jump up to B. Outlining a difference of opinion between Churchill and other members of the British government. Okay, so we do see the difference of opinion. It's mentioned in the top, it's mentioned in the bottom. But was that really what the passage is about? Like, where does it outline that difference? I'm looking at the top. Does it outline the difference in the top? It says some historians have attributed Churchill's staunch position to his temperament, But is it, and it does mention his substantial opposition, but is it outlining the difference of opinion? Is that what the passage is doing as a whole? Let's look at the second paragraph. So we go back to the passage, right? We're just finding the areas we need. Unlike Chamberlain and many other government officials, Churchill did not underestimate the strength. I mean, I guess it's sort of talking about it, but it says he understood the importance. It's not really understood. But what did the other guys think? Right? So yeah, this is a major part of the passage is talking about this difference of opinion. But basically, as we said, these details are really just details. All this stuff about his position. The real point is about what the portrayals were, whether they were consistent, and whether they diminished his political shrewdness. So we have this temperament thing versus this political shrewdness thing. That's what this passage is really doing. So now let's look at choice C. Discussing the extent to which Churchill's temperament underlay his political behavior. Okay, cool. So let's go back to the passage to confirm this. Despite the custom of appeasement in Britain that was cultivated by Neville Chamberlain and substantial opposition within the British government to undertaking a war, Churchill denounced appeasement, and this can be, some people have attributed this to no small part to his temperament. Okay, interesting. So we have it, no small part is an extent, right, to his temperament. Perfect. And the second part, to put too great an emphasis on Churchill's persona diminishes political shrewdness. Hey, cool. So this is, well, we can't go too far with this. So definitely, do you see any failure points? Do we see any failure points in C? I don't see any, right? It does discuss the extent to which Churchill's temperament. We don't have this like in A, this refuting, right? We don't have this going on. We don't have this thing of outlining a difference of opinion, which is really not quite what it's about. Okay, we're certainly not explaining the difficulties, but we are definitely discussing the extent. And then, yeah, we use all these examples, all this example material here. It does do this, but this isn't what it's doing. That's supporting material. Okay, so we're definitely discussing the extent right here. Man, I'm losing this cursor like crazy. We're discussing the extent to which Churchill's temperament underlays political behavior. That is the main thing that the passage as a whole does. So we see what we did here. We understood the passage. We understood the question. We went through these choices and looked for the information. And then we really, the key thing, the moment of truth came when we were choosing between these trap choices and correct answers. And that is really kind of like the heart of RC, is learning how to choose between correct answers and trap choices. So I see some questions coming in. Yeah, someone said every word is important. Absolutely. So let's talk about that. And before we do that, well, does anyone have any questions about this passage? Okay, Marty, we often get trapped in choosing between two very convincing answer choices. How to break free in this kind of situation? Look for failure points. Okay, there's going to be a failure point, so you have to go. They'll feel convincing, like this refuting in A feels convincing, right? It feels, or this resolving part of the dispute in E feels so convincing. So you have to look for those failure points. That's the way you're going to break out of the trap choices. And by the way, you're going to do this untimed when you're practicing. And we're going to talk about something you can do to do this. So I'm going to move on to that right now. Okay. Okay. So we talked about reading the passages and all this stuff. Now, execution. If you're having trouble with RC, execution is going to help a lot. Okay. You have to learn how to execute. You'd be amazed how much execution helps. Like you're thinking, well, I'm not good at this. I don't understand the passages. I'm getting trapped. It's taking me too long. Execution, doing the little things right, is going to make or break your RC. And it could be all you need to get your verbal score into the 40s is better execution. And this applies not just for RC, but other verbal questions. Okay. So you want to do the little things right. So for instance, when you're reading the passage, you want to read it carefully. You don't want to read something that says one thing and think it says another. And, once again, you notice that I was kind of skipping or not skipping, but sort of skimming and not fully processing the details of some of those examples they were giving. You don't need to read all that stuff carefully, but the point is when you do read something, the important parts, you have to read them carefully, see what they say and don't say. This is execution, right? You're maximizing the results of your work. Number 2, make sure you understand that question, okay? This is execution, okay? How do I understand this question? Don't read it too fast. Don't gloss it over. Don't say, read half the question and think you get it. Read the whole question and make sure you understand it. We talked about how important it is to understand the question. Make sure you do that. This is execution. Be amazed. Once again, I see people, you don't read the whole question, and then you get to the answer choices. And here's the thing. If you haven't really understood the question, now you're going to the answer choices, it's going to take forever to answer the question because you're like, well, I don't see why one of these is better than the other. Right? I mean, a simple example is it has to refer to the describe what the whole passage does. I mean, maybe after you practice for a while, you know what the whole passage, it's generally about the whole passage. But anyway, okay, let's say it was about one paragraph. Let's just do that. Yeah, let's flip the story. Let's say it says the primary purpose in paragraph 1. And you say you see primary purpose, you don't totally get the question. Well, now you're going to take forever answering. You say, wait a minute. None of these choices are correct. What am I doing? Now you have to go back to the question. So poor execution, not only does it kill your accuracy, it takes time. Okay. Number 3, read choices in their entirety. I mean, the average GMAT verbal score would be so much higher if everybody on the planet read choices in their entirety. I've seen so many times people miss the questions because they didn't read the choices in their entirety. They read half of it. They read the middle. They read the beginning. They read the end. Something. They didn't read the choice in the entirety. A lot of time you get halfway through it, you think it's right, or you get halfway through it, you think it's wrong, or you pick up a part of it, you think it definitely has to be right. You saw in some of the choices we were looking at, choice A in this passage. Choice A, a widely held view of Churchill's motivations on denouncing appeasement of Germany. Great. Okay. I read most of that. And then I kind of gloss over refuting. Right? Well, that's not good execution. What does refuting mean? You have to understand, what does that mean? That's execution. And then, by the way, as soon as you see it's refuting and it doesn't refute that opinion, that choice is gone. Now you're not circling between the choices anymore, right? You're not taking all this time figuring out, well, which is it? Is it A or C? I can't tell the difference because your execution was right from the beginning. So execution and precision not only get you more right answers, but they get you through this thing faster. And then lastly, confirm that your choice is supported. Okay, go back to the passage. And is this crazy hard stuff to do? No. And the cool part is this will boost your verbal score 10 points if you're executing on all verbal questions. Can make all the difference. Okay, so this is huge. See some questions coming in. Daily read hard, yeah. Business review, yeah, absolutely. Posts in magazines, does it help in improving? Absolutely, it helps in improving them. Do tell us about time management while doing RC. Okay, we're talking about economist helps too. Some other things. So time management in RC. I mean, a lot of what you want to do is do what we're talking about here, and we can talk a little bit more about time management. Can talk about some specifics. But I think your first goal is to develop your skills. And that's mostly what this session is about, is getting your skills strong, because the stronger your skills are, the less time management is an issue. Yeah, then if you go to the Target Test Prep course or one of our blog posts, we have all this outlined about how much time you should spend on a passage, maybe 2-3 minutes for short passages, 3-4 minutes for long passages, and then about a minute per question, and then how to guess. But look, get your skills strong first, and then you can find a resource that goes over how much time to spend for question and when to guess and stuff. Getting your skills. By the way, if you can answer all the questions and you do an execution well and everything, you're going to get through them so fast, time management's hardly going to matter. Okay. Okay, next topic. Okay, this is big. Okay, and this doesn't matter as much in quant. In quant, we don't have to work on what we're talking about here, which is learning to be aware of whether you have truly supported. Because in quant, whether we truly support our answer, because you know whether you truly supported your answer, because you've gotten it, right? Like if the question asks you for the rate, Jim's rate, Well, the correct answer to that question is going to be Jim's rate. And you know you haven't answered the question until you found it, right? Verbal is a whole other thing. In verbal, you could think, well, you know, I did it. I'm good. You went through the choices you like better than the others. You selected, right? Well, have you really supported your answer in that case? Right? Have you really figured out whether it's correct? No, you haven't. You haven't gone back to the passage and said, does it say refuting? You haven't gone back to the passage and say that what was Joe's opinion exactly? Or what are the implications of the statement? So you haven't really supported your answer. So this is huge, because when you're practicing, you should really stick with each practice question until you truly supported your answer. And that's how you're going to learn to get these questions correct, because you know whether you support your answer. You see what I'm saying? So this is major, because all these people, you know, ask me all the time, well, you know, why is my practice accuracy not high enough? What else do I have to do to learn this? If you know whether you've truly supported your answer, you're going to stick with the practice questions long enough to get them correct. Your accuracy is going to be high. Okay, because you're not going to leave the question because you know you haven't supported your answer yet. And there, you know, we can come up with vague reasons for answering a question. Oh, I have this reason. I feel pretty good about this. I like the choice, or it matches the passage, as I keep saying. You know, some vague reason. Well, it sort of fits. It's about this. It's okay. That's not going to get you correct answers in reading comprehension or the rest of GMAT verbal. Okay, vague answers lead to missed questions. Vague reasons, rather. Vague reasons for your answers. Well, I think it's about right. If you're at that point, you haven't truly supported your answer. You're using vague reasons, and there's a good chance you're getting the question wrong. And by the way, you might be so sick of the question, you feel like using vague reasons to choose your answer. I was talking to someone just the other day. He's like, man, I've been doing this forever, and my score's not going up. I asked him, well, what do you do if you're having trouble with the question? He's like, eventually I bail. You can't bail, because the whole point is to learn to get to the correct answer. So if it takes you 10 minutes to answer that one RC question, stick with it. If you have to put it aside and come back the next day, stick with it, because what you're going to learn is how to get to the answer, because that's what the game is here, right? The game is learning to get to answers. The game is not to read the question, have some vague reasons, get it wrong, see what someone else, how to target test prep explain this, right? Okay, so we can't use vague reasons to lead to get to our answer. So what do we need? Solid reasons. Okay, why did I eliminate that choice? Because the passage says this, and this choice says the other thing. It's out. I found a failure point. It's gone. Okay, now you got a great reason. You do that with 4 choices. Okay, now you have 1 left. And even then, you want to make sure, well, is this really supported? The passage says something like that, you know, and then maybe you have to go back and look at one of the others until you find solid reasons and you say, okay, the passage says X, Y, Z. Therefore, this choice has to be correct because X, Y, Z implies ABC. Perfect. Solid reasons. So I'm telling you, if you want to nail GMAT verbal, learn to be aware of whether you truly supported your answer. And when you're practicing, stick with each question until you've gotten to that point. And then how can you lose? Okay, let's hit another passage. Once again, we'll spend a few minutes on this. Be careful. It's a tricky question. It's a tricky passage. Let's see how you do. And okay, we're going to be aware of whether we support our answer, right? We're going to execute well. We're going to be so careful to see whether it's supported, whether we've read the question correctly, right? Like, what does the question mean? Okay, the question is a little funny on this one. It's not too confusing, but you definitely have to answer the right question to get this correct. All these things, execution is really going to help. And maybe try not to put a answer into the chat until you really feel like self-aware that you have supported your choice. Okay, you can start putting your answers in the chat if you have an idea. Don't want to rush you. Okay, we got a couple opinions. Let's see, what else do you think? Tricky, right? But if you're executing well, going through, checking back that passage, should be able to figure it out. Two opinions. Any others before we hit this thing? It's the E's versus the B's. What could be correct? Let's go through this passage. Start with the top. Micro-aware patterns found on the teeth of specimens of the extinct species Australopithecine may provide evidence about their diets. Okay, so may provide evidence about their diets. For example, okay, so now we have some examples. Now notice, you know, I talked about maybe skipping examples, but this stuff could be a little important. For example, Walker dismisses Jolly's hypothesis that Australopithecines ate hard seeds. He also disputes Cizali's suggestion that the heavy enamel of Australopithecine teeth is an adaptation of bone crunching. Interesting. Since both seed cracking and bone crunching produce distinctive micro-aware characteristics on teeth, his conclusion, you know what, it is starting to look like a whole lot of detail. Whole lot of detail in here. I don't know how much it's going to matter. All this stuff, right? So do we have to remember all this? No. Okay, all this stuff. His conclusion that Australopithecines were frugivores is based upon his observation that the tooth micro-aware characteristics of East African Australopithecine species specimens are indistinguishable from those of certain primates that are commonly considered frugivorous. So what is this paragraph really about? The first sentence, micro-aware patterns found on the teeth of specimens of the extinct species may provide evidence about their diets. And then the rest of the examples, a lot of examples. And you know what? We're not going to try to remember all the examples. We just get the idea. Okay, so one guy's saying that there's somebody, they ate hard seeds, another dismisses that. Then two guys are talking about the heavy enamel. And then there's something about fruit eaters and his observation that it matches the teeth of certain primates. Okay, we get the idea. Maybe these microwear patterns tell us something. So that's the simple story so far. However, research on the diets of contemporary primates suggests that microwear studies may have limited utility. So once again, we ended up with however, right? The contrast word. Do we overemphasize this word as you're learning? The answer is no, but we do see that it's introducing a contrast. However, research on the diets of contemporary primates suggests that microwear studies may have limited utility. So we have a contrasting opinion. It first said microwear patterns found in the teeth at the first sentence may provide evidence about the diets, but now it's saying may have limited utility. For example, again, insect eating, which can cause microwear patterns, would not cause much tooth abrasion in modern baboons who eat only soft-bodied insects. Honestly, maybe we just try to understand this because, okay, so this is a great example. You know, it may have limited utility. It may not actually work that well. So then we have this information that tells us why. In addition, diets of current omnivorous primates vary considerably depending on the environments that different groups inhabit. So if Australopithecines were omnivores too, we might expect them to find considerable population variation in their tooth microwear patterns. We could certainly seek to understand this, but we're not going to have to remember every bit of it. And there's a huge difference, right? We're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So some species go from live in different environments and eat different things. Interesting. So that's why this has limited utility. Okay. But we don't have to remember every aspect of that. We can always come back to it. Thus, and now we have a conclusion word. So this kind of tells us this is important. Once again, it's not the only thing that matters, but Walker's description of possible Australopithecine diets may need to be expanded to include a much more diverse diet. Okay. One interesting thing about this is that the conclusion is actually about like part of one of the examples. Walker's description, right? Was way up here among the examples, Walker, right? Okay, so that's unique. But anyway, you know, so it's really about overall about the microwear patterns may provide evidence, but they actually, may have limited utility. And then this guy Walker has a thesis that they can be used that way, but maybe it's not really right. Okay, so now we understand the passage. We're going to go to the question. According to the passage, Walker and Cesali disagree on which of the following points. You know, and the thing is, I mean, I know this seems obvious, right? It says they disagree on which of the following points. It might seem like an obviously easy question to answer, but it's so easy to forget that we might have something that Walker said that Cesali didn't say. We might have something that they agree on or something. So it's not just something that involves these two guys or one of them or that one of them said. It has to be something they disagree on. Okay. So I know, once again, this is just execution. We're going to get these questions right by noticing that and saying, okay, if they disagree on something, something in the passage has to say that they disagree. So either we need both of their opinions and they have to be different, or it has to just literally say they disagree, right? Only those two things are going to work. That's just tight execution. Now, what do we do? Okay, let's go to these answer choices. And then we have to find the right information in the passage. We can start off by looking here in the passage and seeing that it does mention Walker and Cesali right in this area, right? So the information we need is probably going to be here. Okay, the structure and composition of Australopithecine teeth. Is that what they disagree on? Well, what do? We can go back and look at and see, where does it say something about the composition and structure? Does it even mention that? It mentions heavy enamel, right? Does it say that do they disagree about that? I don't see anything. Doesn't say anything. It says they have heavy enamel, but it doesn't say what anyone else thinks about that, right? So this is clearly, A is easy out. Gone. Okay. How about C? Let's see what everybody chose. I just want to, yeah. How about C? Because that didn't get a lot of play. The idea that fruit was part of the Australopithecine diet. Okay, once again, we have Walker dismisses Jolly's hypothesis, this part here. Now, where is this thing about fruit? It says his conclusion that Australopithecines were frugivores. So who is his? Look above, right? Execute. Figure out who his is. Walker, Cesali's suggestion. He also disputes. So this is he is here. And then we jump up a little higher and we get to Walker. And that's how we're going to do this. We have to a lot of time look at these look above markers. Once again, we're using the markers. We're not overemphasizing them. Okay, so his conclusion that Australopithecines were fruit eaters is based upon something. But does it say that anyone else disagrees with that? No. So, okay. That's out. There's nothing about Cesali there, right? How about D? The extent to which seed cracking and bone crunching produce similar microwear patterns. Okay, so over here, let's do the keyword thing. We have to find the right information in the passage. It's going to be so key. We talk about this in the target test prep course a lot, how to find the right information. And one thing you can do is look for keywords like what we see here in this choice, seed cracking and bone crunching. Find that in the passage. Where is it? Where is it? Scan the lines, and we see it right here. It says seed cracking and bone crunching produce distinctive microwear characteristics. Does it say they disagree about that? It's all it says is since both. Since both right here, right? Since both. Both seed cracking and bone crunching produce distinctive microwear characteristics. So we did see this coming after. It says Walker disputes Cesali's suggestion, but it doesn't say that they disagree about this with the extent to which seed cracking and bone crunching produce similar microwear patterns. So look what happens if we try to word match. We get totally smoked by this choice, right? It's not the extent to which they don't disagree about that. Okay. Okay, so we have two choices left, right? And these are the tough ones. We've gotten rid of the easy ones. But you see what we're doing here. We have to execute so carefully because it's so easy to think that any of this stuff is applies because we saw that Walker and Cesali are up here at the top, right? They talk about Cesali here and Walker's here. So all this stuff seems to follow. So what do we have to do? We have to execute super carefully. Okay, so what do they agree about? B, the kinds of conclusions that can be drawn from microwear patterns. The kinds of conclusions. Okay, so Walker and Cesali, do we see anything about, we see microwear patterns in the teeth of specimens, the extinct species may provide evidence. Walker dismisses Jolly's hypothesis. He also disputes Cesali's suggestion. Where does it say anything about them discussing the kinds of conclusions? Nothing, right? It certainly seems right, this choice, but it's totally out. So this is gone on that basis. But look how so many of these choices look right. So many of them look right, you know, because we saw Walker and Cesali, all this stuff, all this detail is mixed in here, right? All this stuff about Walker and Cesali, all this stuff comes right after those two guys. So all of it seems like fair game, and it all gives us the impression that it's correct, that it fits these choices. But what do we really need to do? Okay, let's see this last choice. The function of the heavy enamel on Australopithecine teeth. Walker dismisses, okay, Jolly's hypothesis. We start off with Walker right here in the top. Where's my cursor? Walker right here, right? Walker dismisses Jolly's hypothesis. He also, and way over here is what we need to see, disputes Cesali's suggestion that the heavy enamel of Australopithecine teeth. Oh, wow. There it is. Heavy enamel does it. That's our correct answer. Okay. So what are we doing here? What are we doing here? We had to be so careful. And notice, if you go back through these choices, right, and you think about what you did if you got this wrong, did you have all the information? Like we just said, the structure and composition of Australopithecine teeth for choice A. Did you really have a reason to choose that choice? How about B, the kinds of conclusions that can be drawn from microwear patterns on Australopithecine teeth? Did we really have support for that choice if you chose B? Okay, the kinds of conclusions. I mean, where did that come from, right? Okay, it came from a general feeling about the passage, but some part of you can tell you yourself, wait a minute, I haven't really supported my choice. And that's what we're talking about here today, is that a lot of it is becoming self-aware and saying, why did I choose that? How about C, the idea that fruit was part of the Australopithecine diet? Yeah, the second paragraph talks about fruit eaters. But does it say that they disagree about that? Where did you get, if you chose C, where did you get the idea that that was the correct answer? It was something vague. It wasn't solid support. You didn't see that it said that these two guys disagree about that. It just said something about it, right? Totally different. So you need to become self-aware. And I know I rushed you a little bit. Maybe you needed more time in this question, right? Okay, fine. And you got it wrong. Fine. Okay, whatever. But the point is, how are you executing? Okay, that's what this session is about. D, the extent to which seed cracking and bone crunching produce similar microwear patterns on teeth. Okay, same type of thing. Okay, a lot of people choose D. But the thing is, look at what it says. Does it say that they disagree about that? No. So if you chose D, you chose it on the basis of some vague thinking. So this, we're seeing what the pattern is here with RC. In the course, we talk about strategies. We talk about different trap types. We talk about all kinds of stuff, different types of passages, formats, how some present an opinion, and then some do another thing, and others prove something, and others explain something. All this stuff is great to know. But this stuff we're talking about here today is the foundation of RC, right? And if you know these things, then all that other stuff just becomes tools in your arsenal to use, right? Then you have, okay, good. I know about the different types of trap choices. I know about the different types of passages. Yeah, then they're going to be easier to read because you know the different types. I know about some strategies for looking for information. Yeah, but the first thing you do is say, look, this is a sophisticated test. I have to understand the passage. Okay, this passage is going to test me on my attention to detail. So if I'm looking at something that's just sort of vaguely, attached to the answer choice, then I'm probably going to get this wrong. This stuff is really going to power you through RC. It's going to help you with your accuracy, your timing, how your preparation goes, the whole bit. So these are the things you really want to get straight, even before you do anything else. Okay. Any questions about this passage? Okay, let's go to the next thing. Okay, so we've talked about some of this stuff already, but I want to reiterate it so everyone gets it. Okay, one thing we want to do is practice on time. Don't do your practice timed. I know there's only 2 minutes per question on the test, but there's no reason to do that when you're practicing. You have to learn by doing, and it's just too tough to learn to practice when you're doing it 2 minutes each. And if you think about it, there's nothing else on this planet that everyone practices at full speed. Whether you're talking about soccer or playing the piano or something else, you do all these things slow at first. You learn to take some shots. You run through the plays slowly, and then you do things timed, right? The same thing with the GMAT. It works much better. Look, it's a great step to take. Shoot for super high accuracy on time. Can I get 3 passages, 100% of the questions correct in a row? Untimed. Okay, when you can do that, you have the skills. Now you work on becoming faster. And here's the cool thing. Honestly, I've learned that for GMAT Verbal, that accuracy, the same skills that support accuracy when you're answering the question, support speed. Okay, so for instance, if you see exactly what's going on in the passage and you read the question correctly and you notice what the answer choices say, you're going to be accurate. By the way, all those same things make you fast because you're not going to waste time doing things you don't need to do. So speed and accuracy are very closely tied. So if you can achieve the high accuracy, like I said, maybe get 3-4 passages, 100% of the questions correct in a row, you're probably going to be fast too. I very, very rarely see someone who has high accuracy that's not fast. The second thing, when you're going through these, analyze every choice when you're practicing, okay? Come up with an explanation for each choice. Even if you understand, even if you're saying, look, B is definitely correct, I get it, like there's something wrong with C, I'm not sure what it is. Well, okay, you might be right about B. Analyze C, see what's going on, learn to explain it. And you can look at how to explain it through expert explanations, like the ones in the Target Test Prep course, for instance. Go through the choices and see, okay, how would I explain this if I were an expert? 3, choose an answer, as we said, only when you're close to 100% certain. Use that self-awareness of whether you've truly supported your choice. This is going to take care of so much. And then when you're taking the test, by the way, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to be, oh man, I'm sure this choice. Or you're going to look at the question, I'm not sure. Now, if you're running out of time, that might not be an option. But if you develop your skills, then you can stick with the question. Go, I'm not really sure this choice. And you're not going to just jump and choose a choice. And the same thing is going to go for DS and, questions and quant questions or any other type of question, even the integrated reasoning questions. I've noticed it's so easy to choose integrated reasoning answer choices when you're not sure of the answer, right? So learn to choose an answer, especially when you're practicing, only when you're close to 100% certain. And here's the thing about practice. Next point. Focus on process. Because look, if you get a question right, but you don't know what's going on, you didn't do it right, what have you done? Right? You haven't done much at all. You've done, okay, fine. You've accomplished something, but you really want to focus on process. How did I get to the answer? Did I support it well? Did I waste time? Was I efficient? Did I read the entire choices, or did I have to go through the choices looking to see what was right over and over because I wasn't reading them fully? Get the process right. If your process is good, if you're executing, as we already talked about, then you will get questions correct, okay? And this is what you're doing when you're practicing. You're learning to go through the motions that lead to success. The goal is development of skill. I see a couple questions coming in. How do we decide to read an example and when not to? We can always do an example. I mean, it depends, but you can't, like you said, you can always come back to an example. Okay. So just, I guess the thing is, I'm not saying don't read the examples. I guess that I was worried that I was giving sort of a stronger impression that you can, how do you decide when to read them is you always read them, but you kind of start getting a sense of how you read it to get a sense of the answer to that question, I guess is the best answer to the question, right? You read through, you say, oh, for example, and you start seeing examples, and then it gets more and more apparent that you don't need all the examples. So then you start glossing over it. It says, Einstein this said this, Niels Bohr said that, this other physicist said the third thing. Okay, well, you start reading the first thing like Einstein. Oh, that's interesting. And then you get in the second one. Niels Bohr disagreed because of this, this, and this. And by the way, he used these three things to prove it. Oh, wait a minute. Then at that point, I start glossing over. I mean, and the other thing is you can understand the examples the first time you read them. But, if you come away from it and going, well, which one was Niels Bohr? I don't know. Well, you can always come back to it. So maybe the answer is try to understand them. But don't go crazy trying to keep it all straight in your mind. Okay. Are there any other questions? And by the way, if you get a second to like this post, this session, or subscribe to the GMAT Club channel, that'd be great. Because we really like putting on these and getting other people to know about them and see them and learn how to ace this test. And of course, if you're not confident that you can achieve your score goal, look, I've seen these people go from low scores to high scores over and over again. People using the target test prep course, if you prepare effectively, you can achieve massive scores. We see it happen all the time. So effective preparation is such the key here. So many of these people you see saying, oh, I scored 760. They didn't start there. They scored at they started at 570. They started at 600. They started at 480. They got all the way. Recently, we had someone I interviewed the other couple weeks ago. Anna Moylan went up 300 points. She figured out. So a lot of this is, look, we were talking about execution, how to practice, all this other stuff. A lot of it is about learning just how to prepare and doing the basics, really, right? And like Anna, she just cracked the basics of how to prepare. And she was able to get her score to increase 300 points. 300 points, okay? And of course, we've seen people increase their scores even more than that. And if you're interested in the target test prep course, we do have a, you can see that people that use the course get super high scores. They tend to report scores in the 700s. The average GMAT score is in the 500s. We have a score guarantee. So we're really confident of our course, 110-point score guarantee. And you can always sign up for 5 days and see what we have going on, So that's definitely something to think about. If you like what we're talking about here, now you want to learn the strategies and the key little concepts you're gonna use once you know how to execute and to power along your prep. You can certainly use the course. See if there are any more questions coming in. Okay, I guess that's pretty much it for today, y'all. I really appreciate your coming out. I hope you got some key points from this. The idea was to get you to see how to prepare for RC, what the real important points are, so that way you'll power your prep through, get things right, and really nail the test. So without further ado, take care, y'all. It's been great. Really appreciate your coming out. Till next time. Always great to see you. Appreciate all you reaching out. Okay.